Silas walked the same path home every evening, his footsteps echoing the steady, rhythmic ticking of a clock. The coastal air was thick with salt, and the gray dampness of a life lived in increments of spreadsheets and deadlines. He felt like a stone smoothed by a river, functional but devoid of its original edges. Near the old pier, a gnarled piece of cedar lay tangled in the seaweed. It had been battered by the Atlantic until its heartwood was exposed, twisted into a shape that looked like a silent, frozen prayer. Silas stopped. For the first time in a decade, he didn't check his watch. He simply reached down and felt the rough, stubborn texture of the wood. That night, the light in the garage flickered to life for the first time in years. Silas pushed aside stacks of yellowing newspapers and boxes of forgotten holiday decorations to clear his old workbench. The smell of dust and motor oil was replaced by the anticipation of something new, though the tools in his drawer were coated in a fine layer of rust. The first cut was the hardest. Silas felt the resistance of the wood, the way the cedar fought back against the blade. But as the shavings began to curl and fall like autumn leaves, the tension in his own shoulders began to dissolve. He wasn't just carving a shape, he was carving away the layers of routine that had kept him numb. From across the narrow garden path, Alara watched the glow from the garage. She had lived next door to Silas for 3 years, and they had never exchanged more than a polite nod. She held a mug of tea, the steam rising into the cold night air, and wondered what could possibly be worth such late-night industry. A few days later, the garage door was propped open to let in the afternoon sun. Alara walked to the edge of the driveway, her curiosity finally outweighing her reserve. Silas looked up, wiping sawdust from his forehead with the back of a hand. He didn't look like the man who caught the 8:05 train anymore. He looked like someone who was finally waking up. Alara returned an hour later, not with tea, but with a sketchbook she hadn't opened since her husband passed away. She sat on the porch steps and showed Silas a drawing of a hawk, its wings captured in a moment of impossible grace. "I used to see things in the world," she said softly, "before I started only seeing the chores." For the rest of the week, the two worked in a shared, comfortable silence. Silas shaped the cedar into fluid, abstract curves that seemed to mimic the movement of the tide. Nearby, Alara sat in a lawn chair, her palette balanced on her knee, recapturing the colors of the sunset on a small canvas. They were two islands finding a bridge in the act of creation. The sculpture was finally finished. It was no longer just a piece of driftwood. It was a testament to endurance. Silas ran his hand over the polished surface, feeling the warmth of the grain. The edges were sharp where they needed to be, and smooth where the water had won. He realized that the wood hadn't changed. He had simply learned how to see it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and gold, Alara stood by the fence. She held her finished painting, the colors still wet and vibrant. Silas joined her, and together they looked out at the sea. The routine would remain, but the gray had finally begun to lift, replaced by the deliberate stroke of a brush and the steady bite of a blade.